Welcome to the life and times of Ray Lupo. I am Taryn Lupo, Raphael Vincent Lupo's son. Now, my dad wrote this book for his kids about just kind of like funny anecdotes about things that happened in his life and stories, and just so we could get to know him better, because as you grow up as a kid, you really don't know your parents before you're kind of an adult. So there was this huge section of his life that I knew nothing about, you know, a couple of stories here and there, but it was great to sit down and go through all of his childhood and find out what life was like back when he grew up. I think this would be interesting to even people that don't know him, because there's a lot of historical talk about what Northern Virginia and DC was like in the 1940s and 50s. So I think just that fact's pretty interesting. What I'm going to do is, this was a long interview, and I'm going to cut it up into chapters. So we're going to show a little each week, maybe every other week, and hopefully within a year I get it all done. And if you want, maybe you're watching this where it's already finished, you can just watch the videos play one after the other in a playlist and enjoy the whole thing. I'm hoping that someday someone might even see this, who knows, maybe my grandkids or somebody's grandkids or someone related will see this, and we at least have some sort of living record of who he was and the stories that he and I also found really fun. So here we go, chapter 1. My name is Taryn Lupo. For generations that see this to come, I might not have ever met you. I am the son of this guy here, Ray Lupo. Today is, what are we, like October 10th?
October the 11th.
11th. 10th. 2016. I am 43 years old. Ray?
I will be 75 in 5 days.
75. Okay. So that gives you an idea when this was shot. Chronologically, we're going to start. This is a birthday gift to my dad. I'm going to try to make a video about his book right here. So if you're around, you can get this book on CreateSpace. I think you can still order it, but hopefully there's a lot more in depth about what we're going to be talking about in the book. So let's start with, Dad, let's talk about your name first of all. What's your real name?
Raphael Vincent Lupo.
And where were you born?
Washington, D.C., Sibley Hospital, 1941, October 15.
Now, what was your first memory as a child? Some people can remember back to like when they were 2 and 3. I don't remember anything until about like 5 or 6. What do you remember? Do you have a first memory?
First thing I can remember as a child, I would guess I was 4 or 5, is wandering, looking at a little fish pond in the backyard where we lived in Arlington. It was covered with ice, and wondering and asking my mom if the fish were still alive. She was going to feed them. She cracked the ice. I could see the fish underneath. I think they were goldfish, but I'm not sure about that. And her sprinkling a little bread or something into the pond.
Why did you write this book in the first place, this book here?
I wrote the book because when my dad and mother both died, I looked for histories of their life and found very little. It had the good fortune of being able to make a short history of my mother's life on video. And at the time, I thought it would have been nice if they had left a little written history of what they knew about their parents, their grandparents, etc. So I decided that it would be nice to write something that maybe my sons and grandsons and daughters and granddaughters might someday want to read, just to find out who I was.
Yeah, there's a lot of genealogy missing in our past, especially on your side. Why do we have no family records, really?
Well, we're talking about long before the computer age, even before the telephone age in some cases. My grandfather was born in 1870s, and my dad was born in 1900. And so the idea of having anything before that time would be restricted just to writing. And if you can imagine, through the Depression and other years, people weren't thinking about writing about their family history. So it's only been, I think, the last 30 or so years since the computer age that people have gotten very interested in genealogy. And one of the ways of doing it, of course, is to make recordings like we're doing here, so that someday, 50, 100 years from now, somebody in my family might look at this. Or even more realistically, when I die, perhaps my sons and grandsons and daughters, granddaughters would be interested in seeing the interview. It's a way of being in touch with what was my life and my past.
You know, we're from a little town. One of your sides is from Torre del Greco.
Correct.
The other is from Sorrento?
Sorrento. Those are both ends of Amalfi Drive, correct.
Ah, okay. So what happened to kind of all the records there? Like, why can't we go to Italy and find these records?
It's very difficult to find them because the only place you're going to find records of birth would be the churches that were prominent in these towns. And in that case, it was probably the Catholic Church in both towns. And today, that's easy to research because all of that has been scanned. And you can go on internet sites and find that. But up until recently, that wasn't even easy to do. So that's why you don't find a lot of historical records.
Let's talk about your parents. What were their names?
My dad's name was Raphael Matthew Lupo, and my mother's name was Yolanda Mary de Philippus.
And how did they meet?
They met many years after coming to America in their 30s during the Depression in a New York school, I believe almost like a high school, but was something to do during the Depression to go take various courses, and they were in the same classroom, and that's how they met.
So during the Depression, people just went to classes because there wasn't a lot of money and stuff to do. They just kept going to high school classes?
Well, any class. Adult, yeah, probably more like adult classes are today in the various jurisdictions around the country. And, you know, there's a history in the Depression of people going to movies. Often they had to have something to do. They couldn't get jobs, and they couldn't afford to do much, and the movie was a nickel at that time, and of course the university, or excuse me, the school they went to was free. So that's how they met.
Tell me a little more about your parents. What was your grandma Yolanda's experience coming over to the U.S.? How did they leave?
Okay. Yolanda, my mother, left Torre del Greco. The story goes, of course I wasn't there, that in the earthquake in the volcano explosion of Vesuvius in 1906, the little town of Torre del Greco on the shores and on the edge of that volcano received lots of hot ashes. And supposedly, one of those hot ashes actually burned one of my aunts. And they decided at that time to go to America. It's all part of a history, though, of over 2 million Italians who came to America between 1900 and 1910 to escape what was really poverty in Italy at that time. So that's how she came. My father's story from Sorrento, he came in 1903, 3 years before her. And I don't know much about why they came. I can guess for the same reason I just said. My grandfather, Vincenzo, was a cobbler and did not speak English, but he somehow brought his family here, including his wife, whose name was Raffaela, the female version of Raphael, and they came to America. So that's how they both got here.
I know we have some jewelers in our history. Where are they at?
The jewelers were on the de Philippus side, my mother's side. Her last name was de Philippus, and her dad was a jeweler. And by the time they got to America, her brother Joseph was trained also to be a jeweler.
Torre del Greco is famous for making pearl cameos.
That's correct.
Right.
They make them right out of conch shells and carve them, and they're quite beautiful. And they
mother of pearl.
Mother of pearl, and they're still being made there by hand today.
Do we have any of those left in our family? Do you have a cameo or two?
Yeah, we have some. And I believe that my wife Debbie has one. I think that, I'm not sure, but I think maybe Jean has one. I'm not 100% sure of that. Jean is my daughter-in-law. And I think she may have one.
Tell me about your years in Oakland Street. When you were a little kid, your parents had met. They're living in a little house in Oakland Street. What was that like?
The most that I can remember about it was incredibly small. It might have only had 1 or 2 bedrooms. Of course, it had the little pond outside that I mentioned. It would be termed in today's language a shack, but that was what they could afford after the Depression.
Where was Oakland Street?
Arlington, Virginia, and it's not too far off of what is now Glebe Road.
And that's where you were born, right?
I was born in Washington, in Sibley Hospital, but I came to the little house on Oakland Street.
That's where you were pretty much raised?
Yes, for the first, I would say, 4 or 5 years.
There's a picture here of Grandma and Grandpa. And do you recognize this one?
Oh, yes.
Where they're in there. I guess this is your first shot of you?
I think it's the first shot, and that's my mom's handwriting on the bottom of it. And that's with my mom and dad at Oakland Street. And it looks like
you're 2 years old or 2 months old.
Yeah, and I would guess the way I'm wrapped and the way they're dressed, that it was probably just a week or 2 after I was born, maybe a couple days. Maybe.
Yeah, because it's looking cold. She's in full furs and he's in a fedora and suit, a heavy suit.
Correct, correct.
And then we talk about, is this a picture of the house?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to show this picture. The house, you get a better idea. And what do you remember about that whole experience?
I do remember that when I started school, the first year of first grade, I think I lived in that house. And it was only 2 or 3 blocks from the elementary school. And I do remember my mom walking me to class almost every day. It was too close to have a bus, and we did not have any cars. My parents didn't drive. So that was how I got to school. I don't remember much about the house because
your family was living with you at the time. You mentioned in your book about Ciro de Philippus and Raffaela.
Yes.
And they are in this same house, like all of you are crowded in this tiny house, or is your parents living by themselves?
No. Actually, it's interesting you use those 2 names. I've forgotten them. My dad has a 4th name, a second middle name, Ciro, C-I-R-O. And Raffaela, where is it here?
Canzella?
Let's see.
Raffaela Canzella?
Oh, okay. Canzanella.
Canzanella.
Yeah, okay. No, they were not living in this house. I'm incorrect in what I just said. My mom's father's name was Ciro de Philippus. But by the way, it was my dad's 4th name also.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah,
on both sides?
Yeah, and my dad's mother was Raffaela Canzanella Lupo. But they died at an early age in the 19...
So 1911 in the book.
Yeah, 1911.
In a flu epidemic.
Flu epidemic. Yeah, my grandmother. I never knew her on my father's side.
Yeah, you have a whole chart of family chart you wrote out back in the day.
Actually,
I'll post that.
That was actually written by my father, and
that's his handwriting.
That's his handwriting, and that's the closest thing I have to knowing the history of my genealogy, my family.
His handwriting's so neat. Everybody back then.
Yeah.
Like, penmanship is so bad now.
No, that's right. That's right.
So, tell me about this picture of you in the high chair. That old school high chair, right?
Correct.
And that says your age 4 months.
Right.
And then you were talking about Asunta, right? How do you say it?
Asunta.
And
that's my grandmother.
Arthritis. So tell us about that again.
Yeah, and if you notice her hands, they're terribly crippled, as was her entire body. She had rheumatoid arthritis. This is 1941. The picture was taken 1942 maybe. And there is no such thing as any medication or drug that is going to help that problem. So she was in tremendous pain, not so much in this picture, she has a smile on her face, but when I would visit her 5, 6 years later when she lived in New York in Greenwich Village, I would hear her screaming when she was lifted by her other children, adult children, and put into bed. She was in that much pain. At that time I was too young to understand it, and I just thought she was cranky. But now that I know what that is, it's amazing, and I feel great sympathy for her. She really went through tremendous pain.
Yeah, they didn't really understand rheumatoid very well back then.
Correct.
And then the picture here, this lady is your mom's sister, right?
Right. That is Angelina. And Angelina has a great profile, as you can see. As a photographer, I love looking at that face.
Very Roman nose.
Very Roman nose. And she looks like she's a substantial person. The truth is she was about 4'10", and just an absolutely lovely person.
Your mom had another sister, Izira?
Yeah, Izira, A-Z-A-R-A, also nicknamed Ida.
And Ida, okay.
And Ida.
And Angelina never married?
Correct.
Brother?
Angelina never married, nor did her sister Izira or the brother Joseph.
So that's so unusual. All three of them?
Yeah.
Your mom was the only sibling that had a kid?
No, there was another brother, Enrico or Henry. He eloped with his wife, and my mother eloped with my husband later in life. And it was not that unusual at that time for adult children to stay with their parent for a long time, particularly if they were physically disabled, like my grandmother was. But even after my grandmother died, those three never married.
And then is this kind of the time period the women, especially if they were unwed, would just live with their moms forever, right? I mean, yeah,
well, certainly
much they never moved out.
Certainly Mediterranean women, Italian women, Greek and French, Spanish, and I think that was often the case.
All right, so here's a picture of you and your grandparent, I guess, and your parents. So let's talk about this one.
Okay, the first one is the man on the left there is my grandfather, who was probably in his 60s at that time, late 60s, and his name was Vincenzo. The middle person in that picture was my mother, and then my father. Your
father always wore like white suits? Is it?
I don't know about white suits. It's probably a light gray suit, but
yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
very pimp.
He liked to dress up, and I guess for that picture, I'm guessing that they knew that somebody was going to bring a camera, so they probably dressed up. Even my grandfather is in a three-piece suit. I don't think I ever saw him or have any memory of him in a suit. It's amazing to me.
I thought he worked in a suit and would like work. Like I saw these pictures where he's building a treehouse and he's like in a suit.
That's my father.
Oh, you mean your grandfather? I'm sorry.
My grandfather.
Your dad wore a suit.
Yeah, my dad wore a suit, and most of the men of his generation wore a suit. As far as hats go, that as you see in the picture on the right, he has a hat on. My mother has a fur coat, and there I am, I guess, as a 5 or 6 year old. And hats were worn by men until John Kennedy was president. He was the first person that didn't wear a hat, and the hat as an interesting piece of male clothing disappeared in the early 60s. But my dad always wore a hat until then.
I wear a hat. I try to make it come back.
Yeah?
And I don't wear it enough, though.
You wear a fedora?
But everybody assumes you're bald if you do. You know, that they just are like, oh, what is he hiding?
Listen, if I put my head down here, I'll blind the camera.
No,
the little sun reflection.
I mean, what? Your dad, he went bald, though, right? I mean, looking at this picture, he's going to have a receding hairline. Yeah. But the granddad doesn't.
Yeah, no, he had lots of hair.
I forgot. Is the baldness genes from the mom?
I don't know, but certainly my grandfather had heavy hair. You have heavy hair.
Heavy hair, yeah.
Your brother, 2 of your brothers have heavy hair, and then Tom has his father.
Any of my brothers are balding, are they?
No, but Tom has lighter hair like like Leo, your grandfather.
Yeah, he is.
On the Stedman side.
But Pop had pretty. you know, he kept his hair too.
Yeah.
I don't think we have too much baldness, so if you're watching and you're related, you got it somewhere else.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Both my parents were, my mom was 5'2" and my dad about 5'7", and I'm 6'3", or was.
That's
and,
so weird. How does that happen? Is it like
well, you could say
nutrition here?
You can say it was the milkman, but if I said that, my mom would probably electrocute me, so I can't say that. But it was nutrition. I'm sure that's a whole generation. You see
For
it
a foot higher. I mean,
yeah, you
crazy.
see it everywhere. It's Oriental kids today. Gene and Tony's children are tall, and I think you're seeing it more and more because people eat better and have better nutrition. My dad used to claim that it was the cod liver oil they forced me to take, and I hated that stuff. But is right.
Did you have oil all the time for like as a vitamin, or
yeah. Well, it was a spoonful of cod liver oil, and it was just the most disgusting stuff. And
it wasn't even in a capsule.
Oh God! Well, eventually it reached the capsule stage, and then it was. I still probably cheated and pretended I was taking it when I wasn't.
Like, how would your mom use it? Was it a vitamin, or every day you had it, or?
All I remember is 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. At the end of the meal, the bottle put in front of me and said, "Here, take your spoonful." And you know, it's like the only bad memory I have of my parents forcing me to take that stuff. It was awful.
I mean, where did they? Did her mom make her do? Like, where is that?
I have no idea, because they certainly weren't tall, but somebody must have told them it was good for you. And in fact, it is good for you. I guess it's still, you can go to the GNC and stores like that, and you still buy cod liver oil pills.
That's so funny. So I was looking at the pictures of your parents here, and they're not really that tall, but they look like
slim and trim.
Well, I think everybody was before the food got all
before McDonald's and McDonald's and everything else.
And we ate huge portions.
Yeah, actually, I think they're a pretty handsome couple.
Yeah, they look good. You know, I never knew them when they looked like this.
No, and that's my first dog in that picture. You might show that.
Which dog is? What's his name?
That was Foxy.
Foxy Brown.
Yeah.
I love this shot of them in the garden. Is that in their backyard?
That's in the backyard.
Look at him just smoking that cigar, pimping out.
Yeah, yeah.
Did your mom smoke too, or just him?
Oh no, no.
So she tolerated it.
I guess everybody did. I know. I hated the smell of it because my dad's clothes smelled of cigar all the time.
And then is this like a shot for school? You had blonde hair.
I think they took,
definitely milkman.
Yeah, I think they took me to have a picture taken by a professional photographer, and that's you know, you can tell it's definitely me because of the ear sticking out, the big ears.
You know, not that big of a deal anymore, I don't think. I guess back in the day, it was a big deal, but I like this. And then we get to a shot of this guy.
Yeah, so-called Uncle Norman.
Uncle Norman, very
Uncle Norman was
and when you read the book, there's a lot of interesting things about him.
Yeah, my mom didn't like him.
Let's talk about Uncle Norman. Why he almost looks like a wise guy.
Uncle Norman was from Sicily. At least his parents were. I assume he was. As a kid, I liked him because he was my introduction to sports. My dad had no connection to sports at all as a kid, and Norman was a good tennis player, a football fan, a basketball fan, a baseball fan, and he would take me once in a while to a game up at Annapolis, basketball, and so, you know, I kind of liked him. But his modus operandi was to come every Sunday, have dinner with my parents, and then fall asleep on the couch, and then leave. My mom felt like he never really contributed much.
Kind of mooched to eight. I mean,
he was.
Everybody's got that friend though, and that relative. I mean, I pretty much do that to you guys.
No, you don't.
I come over and I just eat your food and sleep on your couch.
Yeah, but you're invited. Your blood. But anyway, Uncle Norman. Another interesting aspect of Uncle Norman, he showed up in 1948 or 49. In a brand new car. I had never seen a brand new car, and it was a Studebaker. And Studebaker looked like a rocket ship. It was really interesting to see it. I thought that was the hottest thing in the world. Studebaker was a pretty good car. It stayed in business till the early 60s, I think.
They're still cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that.